And welcome. Thanks for joining us today, giving us a little bit of an update with regards to the market movements and what's happening locally and internationally. I just wanted to find out, the Rand has weakened somewhat this week to what it was last week. Has anything happened locally that has maybe affected the reason for the Rand's decline against the dollar?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Thanks for the chat. It's always good to catch up. Yeah, so the Rand was stuck in a very narrow trading range for the second half of April, in and around 14.25, 14.30, somewhere around there. But literally on the last day of the month, last Friday, we ballooned up to 14.50-ish, 14.45, 14.50, where we've stayed ever since. And, you know, looking at the local scene, in fact, it looks like we've got quite a few positive pointers, which might even be capping our losses. If these items weren't on the table, there's every chance that we would be in the 1460s or 1470s or even worse. So it's good to see some positive stuff on the local front. First of all, on Friday, even though we lost ground against the dollar, we reported the biggest trade surplus in history for South Africa over a monthly period, and that was for the month of March. We've been doing really well on the trade surplus side of things. Typically, we're in a trade deficit position. We import more than we export. COVID has changed that. We've got a very subdued local import demand scenario, while at the same time, the world is trying to kickstart their economies. They're building roads, bridges, and all sorts of other infrastructure projects and gobbling up our resources. Everything we dig out the ground is flying out of our harbors. And we've posted consecutive trade surplus months. But March was a cracker. We were supposed to, or forecast to deliver 18 billion rands worth of trade surplus, came in at 57 billion rands, which is way above expectations and by far the biggest we've ever done. So trade surplus for any currency is always a positive thing. We've also had, quite interestingly, the Reserve Bank, not the Reserve Bank, SARS, reporting in the last couple of days that their tax revenue collection is far outstripping their forecasts. So the government at the end of the day has suddenly got more money than they were planning for. Again, a bit of a strange situation for SA. It's below what we should have, but it's more than we thought we were going to have, which is a good thing. But the really good thing for the Rand is that rather than spending our extra money, the Reserve Bank or Treasury announced that they're going to issue less bonds. So they're going to borrow less money rather than spend the extra bucks that we found and use the extra money that we've found in tax collection to plug the holes that we've got. So again, that improves our credit rating perspective, which I'll talk to a little bit later, is an important thing this week. On the COVID side of things, you know, things have settled down in SA to a large degree. I see daily numbers in terms of infections are in and around the 1,000 level, which is still, you know, it's there, but it's nowhere near what's happening in other parts of the world. But importantly, we received Pfizer vaccines. A batch arrived on Sunday night, 325,000 doses, a little more than that, in fact. And that's the first delivery of a weekly program that's going to just run for a number of months. So 1.3 million doses by the end of May, 4.5 million by June or July. And we really need to pick up our vaccination program because we've been a little bit poor on that front. So it's good to see vaccines coming from Pfizer abroad, as well as Johnson & Johnson here locally made at the Aspen plant down in the Eastern Cape. Then, of course, we've always got our carry trade effectiveness, our 10-year bonds delivering 9.5% on average, which is very favorable compared to what you get in the developed world. So the Rand enjoys inflows as a liquid emerging market for our bond assets. And finally, Cyril Ramaphosa, he's fighting an ongoing fight, trying to root out corruption in the ANC and by default, the government. And it looks like he's getting the upper hand. I'm not a political analyst, so I won't go too deep into it, but there's a few things going on at the moment where implicated ANC officials right at the top of the tree, guys that are facing corruption charges, are being, or looks like they're going to be forced to step aside, perhaps as soon as this week, or maybe at the ANC's NEC meeting this weekend. So it's interesting times in the government, but anything that's perceived by the market to be anti-corruption, cleaning house, that's always going to be Rand positive.
Okay, so on that side, we basically, the Rand is holding its head, the dollar is strengthened against the Rand. Is there any other danger where we potentially facing additional losses coming forward?
Yeah, you know, things seem to be going well on the local front, but at the end of the day, our exchange rate is by far a factor of international events as opposed to local. And you can see that, you know, we've had good stuff happening locally, but we still lost ground against the dollar, mainly because the dollar itself has turned its story around. At the end of March, the US 10-year Treasury, which is the word for their bonds, the 10-year Treasury, same as a 10-year bond, it spiked to 1.77%, which sounds low based on what our 10-year note is offering, but it's quite high in the developed world. And that drove the dollar to a high point, and the Rand was under pressure as a result. But US treasuries have consistently come down since then. By mid-April, the 10-year was around 1.5%. Again, a small percentage move, but it makes a difference in the currency market. And the dollar index fell accordingly, and the Rand strengthened as a result. And we sat at 14.25 or 14.30 for some time, sort of middle of April to end of April as a result. However, things don't stand still for too long in the finance world, and the US 10-year is ticking back up. Again, as a result, dollar index is picking up, and that's what's pushed us out to 14.50. Now, the danger, I suppose, that the Rand faces is what's going to happen next in the US story from a monetary policy perspective. We recently had the Federal Reserve, which is their central bank, talking about the labor markets being far from full employment. And by far from full employment, pre-COVID, US unemployment was around 3.8%, 3.7%, which they term full employment. It shot out to 13%, 14% in the pandemic as everybody around the world, you know, shed jobs. But they brought it all the way back down to 6%, which is a fantastic achievement. But 6% unemployment in the States still means millions and millions of people looking for work. But as that number comes down, so does speculation increase that the Federal Reserve is getting closer to their target of full employment, and they're going to start tightening monetary policy, which means tapering their bond buying programs and eventually hiking interest rates. And the big event we've got this week is Friday. Friday afternoon, we get their latest jobs report for April. The first Friday of every month, we find out about the previous month's jobs creation in the States. And they've steadily been increasing the number of new jobs created, so much so that this Friday, the average forecast is 978,000 new jobs over April, which is a massive number. That's the average forecast. The highest forecast I've seen is 2.1 million, which would really be a blowout number. And if we do exceed the average forecast by some distance, it's going to put more pressure on the Fed to start thinking about tapering their asset purchasing programs and maybe hiking interest rates sooner than what they've been telling us. If that happens, the Rand will be under pressure. Of course, the converse is true as well. So if jobs come in weak, Fed tightening's off the table, and the Rand will have a nice little patch.
So, I mean, internationally on the news, there's no shortage of international events that are taking place throughout the world. Locally, South Africa, is there anything that we should be aware of that you perceive to be coming up?
For sure. So yeah, there's two things, and I've already mentioned one, the ANC's NEC meeting this weekend. Again, it's political, so it's not an area that I focus on too much, but politics do impact the Rand at the end of the day. Let's see what comes out of the back of that. Our big event, however, is Moody's, one of the main credit rating agencies, international player in the space, is scheduled to give our latest credit rating assessment on Friday after our market closes, so anytime after 5 o'clock. The ratings agencies aren't bound to give an assessment. So they've got us in the calendar, but we may not hear from them. And we've seen it before, where we're waiting on tender hooks to hear what they say. Nothing happens. But if they do say something, it'll happen this Friday. Moody's has currently got us rated as 2 levels below investment grade, so 2 notches into junk territory, with a negative outlook. Negative outlook meaning that their next move is likely to be another downgrade. Let's wait to see what they took away from our budget speech in February, what they've taken away from us issuing fewer bonds because of the higher tax collection. Is the SA story turning a corner, or are we set for another downgrade? Quite simply, if they downgrade us, the rand will take a hit. If they do nothing, we should, tread water. And first prize is they put us on a stable outlook, and then the rand will do well. So this will all really impact the market on Monday morning because they announce after the close on Friday. But let's see what happens.
No, that's awesome. Hey, thanks so much again for today, and a little bit of an update for the week. And I look forward to next week, Wednesday, where we can catch up again and see what new developments are on the horizon there.
100%. Thanks, Gary.
Fantastic. Have an awesome time.
Chat soon.
Great. Thanks to Foundation team. We really appreciate it.